Welcome to my channel people. Author link will be on the description, make sure to check it out. After Kazuki and Sogutsu calmed down, they finally noticed that no help had arrived despite the big commotion. It could be attributed to Bakuryo's house being in a secluded place far from the rest of the residences, but the smoke coming out of the burning house will certainly attract attention. So, after contemplating slightly, Sogutsu couldn't help but ask Bakuryo, "Teacher, did you know about our condition beforehand?" Smart kid, thought Bakuryo as he stared at the two kids that were eyeing him curiously, so he simply shrugged and said, "I won't lie to you, I only knew about the existence of those demons recently after I met with a certain demon, but it was just a hunch I had that you two could be related to them, so I made plans in case something like this happens." Sogutsu and Kazuki's eyes almost popped out from the shock and they couldn't help but shake their heads before Kazuki said, "Sorry." Bakuryo simply patted his head gently. "Don't worry about it, you are quite the reckless kid, but most of your actions were affected by that demon as it was trying to free itself. But now there's nothing to worry about anymore, I already sealed them and they can't do anything to the two of you anymore." The two brothers heaved sighs of relief, but Bakuryo suddenly smiled at them eerily before he said, "That also means, you will receive double the punishment for your future actions." A chill instantly passed through the two brothers' backs before they nodded hastily, especially Kazuki. Then, those two clones spent the rest of the day with the two brothers, teaching them how to deal with the sealed demons and using their cheap labor to rebuild the house. Meanwhile, despite Bakuryo's ingenious seal, Enja and Suiya were still able to communicate with each other somehow, and currently, Enja was full of rage as he yelled, "Brother! Can you find a way out?" Fire spilled from his eyes. This was his true form. He appeared so much similar to Kazuki, but his hair and eyebrows were orange and burning in flames, and he also has weird shining tattoos covering his body. Meanwhile, in contrast to Enja, who was full of rage, Suiya was sitting calmly and staring at his jail eerily. He truly lived to his name as the peaceful demon, as even this situation didn't change his disposition. His appearance was also similar to Sogutsu's, but his hair was thicker and cyan in color rather than Sogutsu's dark blue colored hair. "That guy was clearly prepared for us. We can't escape from this prison, especially since we can barely use a tenth of our power," replied Suiya calmly, and Enja, the infernal demons couldn't accept it as a flame pillar exploded from his body and he yelled again, "Are we supposed to do nothing then?" "No, that guy can use dark chakra, he used it to trick us and fake his death. Maybe we can manipulate these kids into thinking that he's an enemy of this world. That's the only thing we can do, for now," spoke Suiya calmly with a cunning light flashing through his eyes as countless plans started to emerge in his head. However, he will soon come to find that Bakuryo's ready for everything. What happened with the two brothers was only a small incident in Bakuryo's life, but it made the true clone that was training with Reiko and Murakumo suddenly pause, and Yoshino, who was swinging her sword with a focused look on her face beside him, couldn't help but turn to stare at him in surprise. "Did something happen?" she asked curiously. This girl's Greekmaster talent in swordsmanship wasn't just for show. In fact, her form and the way she was swinging the sword were almost perfect despite her only training for just a few days, but this wasn't only thanks to her talent but her hard work as well, and her biggest source of motivation was none other than Bakuryo. In fact, she couldn't even wrap her head around how much he trained. He was a machine that never took a rest, to the point that he even shocked Murakumo and Reiko, and the latter of the two started to train harder as well so that he doesn't lose to Bakuryo. That's why him stopping his training so suddenly without a reason was completely abnormal in the little girl's eyes. Bakuryo paused slightly before he said, "It's nothing, I just remembered something I need to ask Murakumo about. Keep on training or there will be no cake for you later." Yoshino froze slightly as she indeed was trying to use this opportunity to slack in her training slightly, but Bakuryo instantly stopped her in her tracks with his threat and she started swinging her sword again with an even harder intensity. Nodding with a smile at the little girl, Bakuryo made his way to the courtyard where Murakumo was staying and started discussing the two awakened demons with him. "So, Aster's plan truly worked," spoke Murakumo with a nostalgic look on his face while Bakuryo simply eyed him calmly before he asked directly, "What do you plan to do? Are you going to force them out of those kids even if it means sacrificing them?" Murakumo stared silently at Bakuryo's eyes before he shook his head and said, "No, our paths are different. As long as their strength is used to face the darkness, I don't mind it." Bakurio's eyes kept studying him in search of any falsehood in what he said, but he couldn't find any, so he calmly nodded at him before he asked, "Can you explain to me how demons gain their gifts and how they use their aura?" Murakumo rubbed his beard slightly before he smirked and asked, "Is this information for those kids, or for you?" Bakurio's eyes narrowed slightly before he answered, "Both." Nodding at Bakurio's honesty, Murakumo slowly explained, "With your knowledge, I'm sure you know that some beasts have innate abilities. Chameleons can camouflage, some beasts can spew poison, others can breathe fire, some can even manipulate the elements freely." Bakurio nodded slightly, so Murakumo continued with his explanation. "A demon's gift can be viewed as an innate ability, but it's man-made." "Man-made? What do you mean?" asked Bakurio curiously, and Murakumo couldn't help but chuckle at him. "You clearly studied demonic aura before, and you probably even dissected a few demons' bodies, but you won't find anything that way." Bakurio couldn't help but narrow his eyes at this, since what Murakumo said was correct. Did I miss something in my research? Was the only thought in Bakurio's mind is his clones that were trying to get friendly with the tailed beasts that were protecting the border of the land of demons did plenty of research on some demons they caught, but he didn't find how their ability worked. "I don't blame you. In fact, it took us countless generations before we developed this technique in the first place, and most of the current demons don't even know it, since they simply inherited their abilities from the demons in our generation," spoke Murakumo calmly, and Bakurio nodded in understanding. "Please enlighten me," spoke Bakurio, and Murakumo wasn't stingy with him as he explained. "This actually came from a certain demon that only a certain few know about his existence, and he's called the Sage Demon. He came up with a method to create a new soul. And he called it the Demon Soul." Bakurio's eyes widened in shock, and he couldn't help but question Murakumo. "Are you serious? Wouldn't there be a problem if a body has more than one soul?" Murakumo nodded at Bakurio's question. "That's right. Having two souls can give birth to problems, but he then merged some of his essence with the demon soul and it changed into a different thing. He called it Demon Core." Demon Core. Bakurio's eyes couldn't help but widen in surprise, and he suddenly found himself wondering, who's this demon sage? Demon aura. Something Bakurio was intrigued about since the day he fought Shuden Doji and learned of its existence. His first instinct was to try to understand how to use it to make it his own. Yet, no matter how many demons he dissected, no results came of his research on how they generated that aura or the way they gained their gifts. In fact, he always thought it was something genetic, but Murakumo finally shed some light on his doubts. A demon core, something all the demons are born with nowadays. It was the reason for them being able to generate demon aura and having unique gifts, yet Bakurio never found one on the demons he dissected, which confused him. But why is it when I tried to study them there didn't seem to be any demon cores to speak of? Wondered Bakurio, so he decided to ask Murakumo about it, and the latter calmly replied. "Well, you probably only researched low-level demons. In their case, their demon cores are still underdeveloped, and you can think of it as it being in a spiritual state, and the stronger the demon is, the more developed the demon core is and the more real it will become." Bakurio's eyes narrowed slightly as he thought, this is yin-yang transformation. Seeing the clear shock in Bakurio's eyes, Murakumo calmly asked, "You are wondering how the demon sage can have this kind of unique mastery, right?" "Yes, and how come you didn't mention him at all in the fight against the darkness?" asked Bakurio curiously. Murakumo remained silent for a while before he spoke. "The demon sage was always elusive. In fact, despite my previous standing, I never got the chance to meet him face to face. One day, he appeared out of nowhere and started spreading the method to cultivate demon aura, and the only person I know who met him was my father, the previous demon lord." Bakurio's mind was instantly full of questions and doubts, but he simply shook his head and thought, this world is definitely hiding plenty of monsters, but now is not the time to worry about them. Let the main body think about this since he has plenty of free time. Then, he pondered slightly before he asked, "Are humans also able to create a demon's core? And how's the ability that someone gains gets picked?" "I will answer your second question first since it's much easier. You don't get to pick the gift you gain." "What do you mean?" spoke Bakurio in confusion, and Murakumo simply shrugged and said, "I know, weird isn't it? However, from what we observed, it seemed like demons gain gifts corresponding to their needs and personality." Murakumo's words were simple, but Bakurio suddenly felt as if an explosion went inside his head as the images of certain people appeared in his head. and the commonality between them is that they all had weird designs in their eyes, the Mangekyo Sharingan. Bakurio thought a lot about this subject, and he came to a single conclusion. When an Uchiha awaken his Mangekyo Sharingan including himself, the circumstances he's in and their personality determines the ability they gain. For Itachi, he wanted nothing more than to take revenge for his little brother whom he thought was killed, so his peaceful nature turned into absolute rage and he gained the ability to burn anything with his Amaterasu as well as a powerful genjutsu called Tsukuyomi that was born from his wishful thinking wanting that horrible reality to be just a dream, yet it wasn't. Shisui was the same, he was always someone who loved his friends, yet one day he felt jealous of his teammate that was more talented than him, and in a moment of life and death, he made a choice to save his own life and leave his friend behind even though he could have saved him. That guilt ate at him, and ironically, he gained the ability to manipulate people without even having a choice or control over their actions, and they won't even realize that they were being controlled. But all of these weren't really what intrigued Bakurio the most. What he was most fascinated about is that these eyes are a derivation of the Rinne Sharingan that Kagaya gained after eating the chakra fruit which held most of the power of their world. If the Uchiha could be seen as natural demons thanks to their eyes that are related to the very source of this world, could it be that this demon sage was actually able to study the world to such an equivalent degree and recreated it into demon's aura? Bakurio's heart wavered slightly at the complexity of this task and he wasn't even sure if he would be able to achieve a similar thing. Murakumo was surprised by Bakurio's silence, but he eventually continued his explanation. I was always fond of using swords, so when I created my demon core, I gained a gift that made my sword arts much stronger. Suya and Enja are also similar. One had a peaceful nature like water while the other was always hot-blooded and explosive, so they each got gifts that complemented those abilities, allowing them to freely manipulate water and fire and even enhance them to terrifying degrees. Bakurio nodded in understanding since he experienced their powers and he eventually asked, "So, can you answer my first question?" Murakumo rubbed his beard slightly before he spoke. "Theoretically you can." "What do you mean?" asked Bakurio curiously, and Murakumo kindly explained, "The purest of nature's chakra will be required to create the demon core, and I don't mean the one floating in the world currently after being tainted by the various holy beasts and the 10 tails rampage. You require the original energy of the world. Other than that, you will only need to have good control of it, which is something demons are naturally proficient at, to use the demon core forming technique." Bakurio's eyes widened slightly. Six-path sage chakra requires nature energy from all sacred grounds, but it seems like I will also need to collect the energy of the 10 tails, guess this will take a while. Ellipsis. As Bakurio was thinking about this, one of his true clones that was near the border of the land of demons was currently observing a small red-haired kid fighting a wave of demons with a crazed look on his face while his green eyes appeared completely bloodshot. "It seems like he's about to lose control once more," muttered Bakurio as he stared at a huge tsunami made of sand drowning the rushing demons. As for the kid, it was of course Gaara, the son of the fourth and current Kazekage of the village hidden in the sand. Gaara was the Jinchuriki of the One Tail, and after being treated as nothing but a monster by his village, including his father, he truly felt that this world was nothing but hell, until he met a certain dark-haired individual that treated him nicely. In fact, as Gaara was struggling to regain control over his emotions, he could faintly remember his first conversation with Bakurio. Flashback. "You think you are a monster just because you are housing one in your stomach?" asked Bakurio while staring at the eerily silent Gaara before he rubbed his head to the shock of the little kid and said, "Real monsters hide here, and we all have them." Gaara slowly lowered his little head and saw what Bakurio was pointing at. It was his heart. End of flashback. "No, I can't lose to that monster," yelled Gaara as he watched the army of demons approaching him, but he knew that he needed the power of that monster to fight the demons, yet that power was too wild and it made him feel like he was losing his mind every time he used it. Just as he was going to fall for the temptation and his body started to lose its skin and enter the second-tailed beast form transformation, Bakurio suddenly put a hand on his shoulder and suppressed the One-Tail's chakra before calmly throwing a lethal kunai into the air and started walking back with Gaara. The little kid could only watch in horror and admiration as the small kunai transformed into a rain of death that turned the noisy battlefield into a silent graveyard. This was the combined power of Dark Rain along with undodgeable throw. In a simple-looking house, a little red-haired kid had a look full of focus on his face as he listened to a black-haired man's instruction. Try minimizing the chakra you get from the one tail and only leave as much as you can control without losing your mind, spoke Bakurio calmly to Gaara, but the little kid simply frowned with evident struggle on his face before he said, I can't, the one tails doesn't want me to control it, so it keeps increasing the intensity of its chakra, making it hard to control. Bakurio frowned slightly before he thought calmly, guess it's time to complete the advancement quest for my sealing arts. Then he said to Gaara, let me try something. Then, he calmly put his finger on Gaara's forehead and entered his seal space. There he saw a giant tanuki-like beast that was made out of sand and covered in seal marks. Human, are you here to convince me again to obey this kid? That's not going to happen, yelled Shukaku the moment he saw Bakurio, causing a sonic boom to burst from his mouth, although it only served to blow the hair of Bakurio, who wasn't intimidated at all and calmly said, I indeed want you to help Gaara, however, this time I have another offer for you. Shukaku paused slightly before he said, what is it? He knew from talking with the other various tailed beasts that he had no chance of opposing Bakurio if he wanted him harm, but he still didn't want to simply submit, so he wanted at least something in exchange. Bakurio calmly circled around his body and observed it calmly, unafraid of the possibility of getting attacked, and after completing a whole circle around Shukaku, he calmly spoke, one of your innate abilities is the power of using seals. In fact, your whole body is covered in them. Shukaku frowned slightly, not knowing what Bakurio was getting at, so he asked, so what? Well, you want to be free, right? I can give you freedom. Bakurio had a weird smile on his face, like a devil tempting an innocent victim, all for his own benefit. Ellipsis. Sealing Art Advancement Quest. Create a living seal. A clear task, yet almost impossible in its complexity. Bakurio searched far and wide to find any clues about living seals, yet he always ended up empty-handed until he laid his eyes on Shukaku, a tailed beast with the unique ability to use seals. And the source of these seals is none other than his own body. They were a part of him, so he was the closest thing that Bakurio can find to a living seal. So, he came up with a crazy idea, turn this tailed beast into a seal. After explaining his plans to Shukaku, the tailed beast was hesitant at first. Bakurio wasn't going to free him entirely, but he was going to use part of his body and his mastery over souls and seals as well as puppets to help him create another version of his body that he can manipulate on the outside world, while his main body remains inside of Gaara as a simple chakra source. Ellipsis. After some convincing, Shukaku frowned slightly before he spoke, I accept your offer, but only with the condition that you give me at least a cage-level body to manipulate. Bakurio smiled slightly before he nodded and left Gaara's seal space and walked slowly to an empty field. Where are you going, teacher? I've reached a deal with Shukaku, I'm going to show him something. Then, Bakurio took out a simple-looking scroll and dripped some of his blood on it to summon its content. Summoning Jutsu. Undead Berserker. Suddenly, a giant 6-meter-tall armored figure appeared in front of Bakurio and Gaara. It held a pitch-black giant battle axe in its hands, and 2 hellish blue flames shined under its helmet where its eyes were supposed to be, and if anyone looked closely at the seams in the joints of its armor, they would notice that it was a skeleton. Gaara felt a chill just by standing in front of this entity, but Bakurio simply smiled at him and said, so, do you like it? After a few seconds of silence, Gaara suddenly spoke. Shukaku said that he accepts the offer. That's good, let's start then, spoke Bakurio calmly as he put his hand over Gaara's forehead again. Ellipsis. 2 hours later, the previously armored undead giant became covered in countless seals on every part of its body, and other than this, its previously skeletal body was now covered in flesh and appeared no different than a normal human, as even the blue flame flickering in its eye sockets disappeared and was replaced by eyes that had brown pupils. Shukaku controlled his new body and removed his helmet, showing that he had a bald head and somehow resembled an elderly monk, and kept observing his body in surprise. This is quite the appearance you chose for yourself, spoke Bakurio calmly, but Shukaku instantly responded, that's none of your business, and kept testing his new body. This body is strong. That brat didn't trick me. Does he trust me so much, or is he simply foolish? Contemplated Shukaku while Bakurio simply smiled and patted the worried Gaara. It's a pity that I had to give him one of my best soldiers, but it's worth it. He will have to return to Gaara to recover his chakra, which will make their relationship grow stronger, and we get a strong soldier that can help defend against the demons as well. Contemplated Bakurio silently, feeling relieved to find a solution to Gaara, who was still weak yet having to come to this forsaken place. Then he suddenly recalled something and said, I think I saw this person before. Shukaku, who was winging his axe causing huge winds, suddenly paused and approached Bakurio with a cold look in his eyes. Impossible, he's been dead even before you were born. Bakurio nodded at him before he shrugged and said, I'm sure you know about the dead coming back to life. They are constantly fighting against the dead hunters, and I'm pretty sure someone fought him before and recorded him as a very strong Fuinjutsu user. He should be in the village of the dead right now. Those bastards dare desecrate Bunpuku's grave. Shukaku was full of rage as he roared into the sky, causing the clouds to part. Well, the world is a chaotic place right now. I suggest you get used to your new body before you make any rush moves. No, I can't sit aside like this. Then Shukaku started running away at a fast speed, to the shock of Gaara, who finally spoke. Teacher, will everything be okay if you let him go? Bakurio simply smiled and said, don't worry, this situation was part of his plan to bring Shukaku under control after all. Meanwhile, Shukaku traveled at a rapid speed while thinking, old friend, don't worry, I won't let these bastards use you. His destination was the location of the new hidden village of the dead, and it was located in the land of Noodles, south of the land of the earth. The body Bakurio gave him was at the high cage level, and coupled with his immense chakra, it didn't take him long to reach the land of Noodles. From that point on, he slowed down his pace so as to not alert anyone of his presence, and even used seals to shrink his giant body. However, he soon started frowning. This is weird, why does it appear as if no one is guarding the way to this village? This should be impossible considering the level of ninja in it. Feeling how abnormal this situation was, Shukaku suddenly spread his seals to see if he was under some kind of genjutsu or a formation, and to his surprise, he was. However, it was already too late by the time he realized this, as he suddenly found himself surrounded by countless ninjas. It seems like I walked right into your trap, muttered Shukaku while staring at an Uchiha clan member that actually had Mangekyo Sharingan and was eyeing him coldly. If Shukaku realized who this was, he wouldn't be as calm. This was Izuna Uchiha, Madara's younger brother and previous owner of Jikaninki. And he wasn't even alone, as many old masters surrounded him, including his old friend Bunpuku, who sighed and said, Shukaku, you shouldn't have come here. Bunpuku, you are really here. Shukaku's eyes widened in surprise as he stared at the dark eyes of the old man that was raised from the dead against his will. Bunpuku was the first Jinchuriki of Shukaku, and this tailed beast was sealed inside of him right after he was born. Quite the unfortunate child, yet he was so talented to the point that he didn't find any difficulty in withstanding the corrosive properties of a tailed beast's chakra and soon mastered it completely. However, as he showcased more and more of his power, people in the land of the sand started to grow fearful of him, to the point that they started to shun him and call him a monster, while some started to even think that he was the incarnation of Shukaku. A monster. A similar fate to most Jinchuriki. So, he ended up leading a lonely life with only the demon sealed inside of him keeping him company, and they eventually grew close to the point that Shukaku even felt that Bunpuku was similar to Hagoromo, who can be considered as his father, and Bunpuku took great pride in that compliment and thanked Shukaku for it, as he felt it was the nicest thing anyone had ever said to him. Now, Shukaku was faced with this same old man, and he could see that the area was covered in his seal to prevent him from escaping, and he couldn't help but yell, "Old man! Use your seals to remove their control over your body." Bunpuku calmly shook his head before he pointed at Izuna and said, "Not to mention my seals being ineffective, even Madara Uchiha's brother, who has some understanding over a similar jutsu that can be used to summon the dead, still wasn't able to do anything to dispel it, even after the collaboration of many clans that takes pride in their seals' mastery, such as the Uzumaki. This what should I do to free you?" Spoke Shukaku, still not losing all hope, but Bunpuku simply shook his head again and said, "Only by killing the caster can you stop this jutsu. Although that appears to be impossible otherwise, the dead hunters that have been fighting us all this time would have already done it." Shukaku froze in shock, and he couldn't bring himself to accept this crazy reality, but Izuna suddenly spoke at this time. As this old man said before, you shouldn't have come here, but since you are already here, then you should stay. Then, just as his words died down, the crowd of ninjas started to rain attacks on Shukaku from all directions in the form of ninjutsu and deadly projectiles, but he shielded himself with sand and successfully defended against them, prompting Bunpuku to say, "Sorry old friend, Dharma power sealing technique, Sen no Ryo." Right after, he started playing a biwa, causing a few purple chains to emerge from his body and charge at Shukaku while avoiding his sand defense and exploiting any holes in it. Although, Bunpuku soon came to find out that he couldn't break through the defense of Shukaku's body armor so easily. However, a man suddenly came charging from the crowd while covered in a lightning chakra cloak and yelled, "Hell stab. This is." Shukaku could barely react and manipulate his sand to create a barrier in front of him, but the man covered in lightning easily pierced through his defense with his hand that was covered in lightning and even made a hole in his armor, which Bunpuku's chain instantly pierced through and started sucking Shukaku's chakra and showed his true form, a giant skeleton. "What's this?" wondered Bunpuku and the others silently. They were confused by the clear aura of the tailed beast and thought he only took a human form, but it seemed that the matter was far much more complicated than they thought. Shukaku stumbled slightly, but he quickly swung the giant axe that was on his back and cut the chain away before he eyed the man that broke through his defense. "You are the third Reikage. It seems like I should have really listened to Bakuryo's advice and waited until I get used to this new humanoid body," was the thought on Shukaku's head as he stared at the countless legends that kept appearing one after the other. Azumo didn't require any flesh or DNA to summon people, so the immortal army he accumulated was terrifying to say the least, and now Shukaku was the second person to witness them in their full terrifying view. "Where do you think you are looking?" spoke Izuna eerily as Shukaku locked eyes with him, only to find himself losing control over his body. This was the genjutsu of a Mangekyo Sharingan. "Tch, what an idiot, but he will be a great addition to our forces," muttered the second Mizukage while staring mockingly at Shukaku, who couldn't help but mutter, "Is this really the end?" Just as this thought crossed his mind, a group of masked figures started to rain attacks on the revived monsters, and he clearly knew this attack as he saw one person use it before. It's Bakuryo's dark rain combined with his undodgeable throw. "Careful, the dead hunters are here, don't let them take Shukaku away," yelled Izuna at the top of his lungs while swinging his sword to deflect the rain of deadly kunai, and right after, a terrifying battle ensued between the two groups under the constant fall of the dead rain, which was the signature move of the dead hunters. One of them landed beside Shukaku and said, "Leave, we will handle the situation here." "Who are you people? Why are you saving me?" Shukaku couldn't help but wonder, but the dead hunter simply stared at him coldly while reeking with killing intent before he said, "Thank the man that gave you your current body." Then, without waiting for Shukaku's response, that dead hunter directly sent him flying with a strong wind release before directly retrieving a kunai and clashing with someone attacking him. It was Izuna with his sword. Tens of clashes later, Izuna made some distance away from the dead hunter and said, "Are you sure you want to keep interfering with our plans?" Izuna watched as anyone who tried to run after Shukaku ended up facing the terrifying assault of the well-coordinated dead hunters, but the one facing him simply stared at him coldly and said, "Puppets shouldn't talk about plans." Then all of the dead hunters started retreating at the same time to an area that was filled with all kinds of traps that they prepared beforehand, which forced the immortal army to halt its assault, as some of them were being sealed and captured if they act even a little bit carelessly. Later that day, Shukaku with his half-destroyed armor found himself returning to the small house he left earlier in the day, and he could see a little kid training tirelessly despite how late it was while Bakuryo was calmly watching over him, although he had a clearly lost look in his face as if his mind was in a completely different place, but the moment he approached further he instantly detected his presence and stared at him with a smile. "You are back, it seems like you learned the hard way not to mess with those dead people." Shukaku frowned slightly before he said, "That's right, I should have followed your advice, I'm not ready yet to deal with them." "Oh. So, what do you want from me after failing to free your old friend? You know you are free to go wherever you want, right?" spoke Bakuryo with a smile while Gaara couldn't help but pause his training and stare at them curiously. "I've been observing how you train, Gaara, and I can tell you are a great teacher. Please teach me how to control this body properly and maximize my strength. I will give you anything in exchange." Spoke Shukaku with determination clear in his now visible face thanks to the broken helmet. He finally understood the potential of his current body, because if he was in his old one, he wouldn't have survived even with the help of the dead hunters. Teacher, Gaara stared at Bakurio worriedly, but Bakurio simply patted him and replied, I don't need anything from you, I just hope you help Gaara tame the giant reserves of chakra of your main body. That's all. Are you sure? Asked Shukaku again, surprised that Bakurio wasn't going to ask anything out of him, especially when he saw how greedy the army of undead was, as they clearly wanted his power. However, the smile on Bakurio's face couldn't be any more genuine, and it made Gaara's eyes tear up slightly since this was the first time someone appeared to care so much for him. So, after some silence, Shukaku spoke seriously, fine, I agree, and right at that moment, Bakurio received a notification from the system. From the moment he approached the lonely Gaara that was sent to fight the demons because of his position as Jinchuriki, Bakurio has already planned but that point how to earn Shukaku's trust, which is why he only told him about his resemblance to Bunpuku just to make him act recklessly so that he feels indebted to him later when he saves him and return to him as he just did. And after shaking hands with him and agreeing to teach him how to control his new body, the sweet sound of the notification he was waiting for finally echoed in his ears. Quest Friend of a Tailed Beast 3. Befriend 3 tailed beasts from this world. Reward 2000 points plus the skill, Sand Army. Hopefully, these aren't useless summons since I already have plenty of strong ones, thought Bakurio silently while staring at the skeleton body he gave to Shukaku before he read the description of the skill curiously. Sand Army Level 1. Grants the user the ability to summon soldiers made out of sand that have a certain level of autonomy and can be given complex instructions. Can summon one soldier per level. Cost 500 chakra. Bakurio's eyes widened slightly as he was truly surprised. This was the first time he received a skill from this chain of quests, the first two being the abilities, Kurama's Inheritance and Exoskeleton. This skill however didn't appear that bad considering the number of true clones he had, which means at level 100, he's going to have a terrifying army at his command that would only cost him chakra. So, without hesitation, he cast the skill, and instantly, sand started to gather in the air in front of him and formed into the shape of a typical saucer made out of sand, and it was covered in seals similar to the ones on Shukaku's body, but Bakurio was disappointed since he could tell that the soldier appeared to merely have the most basic quality of weapons and armor. Gaara stared at the sand soldier curiously and asked, Oh, teacher, what's this jutsu? Bakurio narrowed his eyes slightly and replied, I'm just testing it out, give me a second, before he immediately used his appraisal ability on it. Sand Soldier Level 1. Attributes. STRAGI Phi SPI. 100,100,100,100. Abilities. Spear Thrust, Sand Spikes, Sand Armor. It seems like it has 20% of my current attributes. This isn't that bad of a skill considering I can summon 100 of them soon and they might even get stronger and gain far better skills and items as well. The moment Bakurio finished his thoughts, he turned to Gaara and said, Go ahead, test your strength against it. I will beat it easily. Proclaimed Gaara before he started manipulating sand into a spear and shot it at the soldier, but the latter simply defended against it with his spear and appeared to have looked at Gaara as a potential enemy, so it rushed at him. The reaction speed isn't that bad. Did it inherit my own as well? That would be broken, and it also can act without orders, wondered Bakurio as he watched the sand soldier giving Gaara a good fight despite it being weaker than him physically, but Gaara soon got used to its attacks and was able to defeat it by trapping it in his sand and destroying it with his sand coffin jutsu. See, I told you I can beat it. Spoke Gaara with a delighted look on his face, but Bakurio simply grinned and said, You did, yes, this will be a good way to train you from now on. Spoke Bakurio calmly as another sand soldier appeared in front of him similar to the last one carrying a simple-looking spear and directly rushed at Gaara with deadly thrust. That became the new training routine for Gaara while Shukaku started training in refining his control over his massive chakra reserves, and Bakurio was skilled in teaching this considering that he did a similar thing with Kurama, so everything went pretty smoothly. Meanwhile, Gaara wasn't the only person to benefit from Bakurio's sand army being their sparring partners. In fact, Sasuke, Naruto, and every single kid of the various academies started to use them as sparring partners through his numerous true clones, causing the skill to level up at a frightening speed. Bakurio discovered that the quality of the Sand Army's weapons and armor, as well as skills, kept increasing, and they started wielding both a shield and a spear like Spartans until the skill level reached 30. That's where he gained a new type of soldier, an archer, and their quality kept increasing with each level as well. At level 60 he gained a new type of soldier which he referred to as a Sand Assassin. Their attributes and abilities were as such that they were swift and good at sneak attacks, and they surprisingly looked like bandits from their clothes and the bayonets they wielded, but they lacked the durability of the Sand Soldiers. At level 90, he gained the ability to summon a Sand Rider. It had human-like intelligence and actually inherited 40% of his attributes. But its fearsomeness didn't end there, as it also had incredible skills in controlling sand and had great mastery over the weapons it wielded, which could be a sword or a spear. It also had great mobility as it was riding a sand horse, making it a fearsome force, but Bakurio can only summon 10 of them while the rest needed to be normal soldiers. However, he was immensely satisfied with this skill, especially considering that he had more than 100 true clones, so he easily gained an army of 10,000 soldiers that he could use as much as he wanted without worrying about casualties. In the hidden village of the dead, a meeting was held attended by the previously strongest legends of the ninja world, but the most terrifying person among them was a hunched man sitting at the end of the table, and he was garnering many looks of fear from the great characters. This was Mara, Izumo's right-hand man, and these legends understood after many of them had their souls tortured by him from showing the slightest signs of disrespect that he wasn't someone they could mess with. "What brought you here?" spoke Izuna coldly while staring at Mara, and the latter calmly observed them and said, "I'm here because the bunch of you were incapable of capturing a tailed beast that came to your doors. How disappointing, especially considering that many of you didn't use your full strength to finish that easy task." Right as he finished his words, Mara suddenly raised his hand, but it was only a while later that the people in the room felt the sound of a sonic boom echoing from where Izuna was sitting, and they noticed that he disappeared from the room, which had a new hole added to its wall. Then, a blood-curdling scream echoed from the distance that made the people in the room feel a chill, and they all understood that it was the effect of Mara's attack, because it can even harm the soul directly. This is the price for not using your Susanoo and hiding your full power. Now then, let's continue with these meetings. Any plans to deal with the dead hunters and their new sand soldiers? As this meeting in the land of the dead was undergoing, Madara, who was training with one of Bakurio's true clones, suddenly felt a chill coursing through his body, and his heart suddenly started aching, causing him to snap out of his meditative state and lose control over the natural energy running through his body, making him almost turn into stone if not for Bakurio's quick reaction in expelling it out of his body. "Did something happen?" asked Bakurio with a serious look on his face, and Madara simply stared at the air silently before he responded, "I'm not sure. My heart is aching," and Izuna's face flashed across my mind for some reason. "When are we going to save him?" Bakurio stared silently at Madara before he let out a sigh and thought, "It seems like he truly values his brother a lot, but the pain the world is going to suffer is only starting, unfortunately." Being stared at by the intimidating gaze and aura of someone like Madara wasn't something anyone can handle, but Bakurio simply patted him on the shoulder and said, "I won't let you go unless you at least master the 6 paths Sage Chakra. Those weaklings don't deserve all this wariness from you. You are pretty much handling most of them with your true clones, right? What are you hesitating for?" Madara's eyes were growing colder and darker the more he spoke, but so is Bakurio's as he stared at him eerily and responded, "Those guys aren't even the start of my worries. If I had confidence in my current power, I would have gladly ended all of the chaos in the world right away, but we can't make a move yet, unfortunately." Madara fell silent as the pain in his heart didn't fade despite him understanding Bakurio's logic, and noticing this, Bakurio smiled suddenly and said, "Don't worry, I will soon finish my bloodline research, which will allow us to grow much stronger, and it will increase your affinity for sage training as well." Madara paused slightly before he nodded and said, "Fine, I will wait for a bit more," before he left, since he wasn't in the right state of mind to continue his training anymore, and Bakurio simply instructed Hashirama to go console him before he went to check on the progress of the advancement quest of his medical art mastery. Meanwhile, in the hidden village of the dead, Mara went straight to the point in his discussion with the various legends. "Were you able to decipher the working principle of those sand soldiers the dead hunter are using?" And responding to him was a man with long and straight bright red hair. He wore clothing with a swirling design on them. This was the clan head of the Uzumaki clan before its fall, Naoki Uzumaki. They seemed to be puppets made with a combination of sand and seals, but they also appeared to have a consciousness of their own, which is something we couldn't decipher yet. Mara's eyes flickered coldly before he nodded and asked, "Have you figured out how to deal with them?" And this time, it was the second Mizukage that responded with a smirk. "They are weak to fire and lightning attacks, but the most effective method so far is water release, as it slows them down and makes them far easier to deal with." Mara contemplated silently to himself, letting the room fall into a pit of eeriness before he stared at everyone coldly and said, "The situation is becoming too stable. Start spreading the chaos once more and find a way to counter the abilities of the dead hunter. I will be expecting good news next time I come here." Then, he simply vanished into thin air, and some people couldn't help but let out sighs of relief, while some members of the Uchiha clan rushed to check on Izuna's well-being, and they found him squirming on the floor with his face full of pain, but he wasn't screaming anymore and only gritting his teeth instead, as some medical ninja tried to heal him to ease his pain, but nothing worked. "This pain, I will make to repay it tenfold if I ever get the chance," thought Izuna with his eyes burning with pure hatred, and that hatred was one of the most delicious delicacies that monstrosity could enjoy in his dark cell. Ellipsis. What a great feast, scream more, struggle more, all will be in vain at the end, and only I will be there to watch the satisfying looks of despair on your eyes as I snuff out the remaining strands of life out of their souls. Ha ha ah. A deranged laugh followed by a devilish smile spread above the dark throne of this unknown location, and as it all ended, the figure covered in darkness suddenly had an amused smile on its face, as its abyssal eyes that appeared to hold the whole cosmos in them seemed to have caught sight of something interesting. It was the different true clones of Bakurio, each doing their best to master new skills, and his eyes eventually landed on a particular true clone that was sitting alone on a remote island and trying to uncover the evolved form of Dark Chakra. Evil Chakra. So, with intrigue, that being suddenly waved its hands, causing a beast-shaped mouth to appear in front of the true clone, and before it could react, it was already swallowed by it and teleported to an unknown location, something that can only be described as dark and eerie. "We finally meet," spoke the figure on the throne, and Bakurio's surprised eyes instantly turned empty and cold as he replied, "Indeed." Ellipsis. The moment this incident happened, all of Bakurio's true clones as well as the real body felt their connection with that true clone suddenly disappear, as if something or someone had swallowed its very existence, and some of them instantly launched an investigation to find what happened to him. However, not all the true clones stopped their duties, and one such a case in particular is the true clone responsible for completing the medical art advancement quest. Currently, this true clone had just arrived to the Land of Rivers, at a curry shop that Bakurio visited in the past with Mukai and Kurama called the Curry of Life, and he met Jiraiya here for the first time as well. And after seeing the old lady working in it, he couldn't help but feel nostalgic as he ordered, "1 serving of your hottest curry please." The owner of the shop, Sancho, smiled widely and responded, "Right away young man, you must be tired of traveling." Bakurio's appearance changed drastically over the years. Add to that he was covering his face, it only added to the fact that she wouldn't be able to recognize him, but he still struck up a conversation with her anyways and said, "Owner, where's your son that used to help you in the shop, and why is it empty despite being lunchtime?" The grandma froze slightly and she couldn't help but shoot Bakurio a curious look to confirm if she knew him or not, but despite how familiar his cold eyes felt to her, she still wasn't able to recognize him, but she still replied to his question with a sad look on her old face. Karashi left to join some band of criminals called the Kurosuke family. They took advantage of the current chaos in the world and took control over the Katabami gold mine that the villagers here use as their main source of income, and what's worse is that they are forcing them to work for them to their deaths under the pretense that they would provide protection for them, although that's not really true, as plenty of ghosts and rising dead have been terrorizing this area without them interfering. "And your silly son actually decided to join them, huh?" muttered Bakurio, and the old woman let out a lonely sigh and said, "He's a good kid, but he's an idiot." "Well, I guess that's a good way to put it," muttered Bakurio as he started eating and enjoying his curry, silently bringing a smile to the old woman's face as she kept staring at him before he put down his chopsticks and prepared to pay her, but she suddenly smiled and said, "Consider this one on the house. It's been a while since I had someone to talk to and serve him my food, plus you are an old customer, right?" Bakurio stared at the old woman with a surprised look on his face before he took back his hand and said, I will go deal with the bandit and get you back your stupid son, but I have an offer for you in exchange. What offer? Asked old Sancho curiously, and Bakurio simply smiled and said, work for me from now on. The old woman was shocked at first, but her eyes suddenly started tearing up. She lost all hope in life with her business dying and her own son leaving her, so how could she not feel touched by the kindness of the man in front of her? So she could only shakily hold Bakurio's hand and said gratefully, thank you. Bakurio simply smiled and thought to himself, no thank you, for people like you are what's letting me keep the last trace of my humanity. After bidding goodbye to the old shop owner with a warm smile on his face, Bakurio calmly turned around and started making his way up to the Katabami gold mine that wasn't that far from the Curry of Life shop. Dealing with the Kurosuke family was one of his goals when he came here, but it wasn't his main purpose. His goal was to complete the advancement quest for the medical art mastery. Medical art advancement quest. Life is a miracle that no one can truly comprehend or understand the true value of. This is why healing is a miraculous art, as it can prolong that life or restore it to the way it was meant to be, heal 5 terminally ill people and raise them to full health. Current progress 4/5. Itachi, Kimimaro, Murata and Nagato, each had serious illnesses that would have resulted in their untimely deaths if they weren't treated quickly, but they eventually met Bakurio and he managed to treat them, and now he only needed one more person to treat before he can complete the mission. His target to complete the mission was a member of the Kurosuke family. But not any normal member. This criminal gang was a bunch of rogue ninjas ruled by a former member of Kuri's 7 ninja swordsmen, Raiga Kurosuke. He was known as the Thunder of the Hidden Mist as he wielded the thunder swords, Kiba. However, one day during the Third Ninja World War, he and the rest of the swordsmen were chasing after Guy's team, and his father, Dai, ended up sacrificing himself by opening the 8th gate and killed 4 of the swordsmen, and only 3 survived and ran away, and he was one of them. Bakurio's target, however, wasn't this washed-up swordsman. It was a special young boy that became an inseparable part of his life. He slowly made his way into the mine, and right as he arrived near the entrance, a few hidden members of the Kurosuke family started throwing shurikens and kunai at him. Attack first, questions later, huh? Well, let's make it death first then, muttered Bakurio as his sharingans revolved eerily, and he calmly dodged all of the projectiles and caught some of them in the air, and threw them back at every single criminal that attacked him. Then, the miners watched as he didn't even falter for a second in his steps and kept moving forward while the criminals started falling from their hidden locations with their own weapons lodged in their heads. A bloody scene was left behind him. All of you are safe. You don't need to worry about the Kurosuke family anymore, spoke Bakurio calmly as he stopped for the first time, and the miners' eyes couldn't help but tear up. Bakurio stared at their disheveled and skinny figures as they dropped their mining equipment one after the other and started thanking him, but he simply frowned and thought, I can barely detect the leader. This is quite surprising considering that my Sharingan is evolved and had already reached level 100. Thought Bakurio with intrigue in his eyes before he locked eyes with a certain teenager that was dressed like the criminals before he appeared in front of him directly and asked coldly, do you want to live? Why yes, replied Karashi, Sancho's son, while stuttering, and he almost wet his pants, but some of the miners instantly reacted, Sir, please don't spare him, he's also a member of the Kurosuke family. Indeed, he even left his own mother selfishly. Bakurio stared at Karashi coldly and thought, it's a shame that I need to let this pest live without letting him learn a good lesson. So, he turned to the miners and said, make sure to teach him the price of his wrong choices, but leave him alive for me. The miners' eyes instantly lit up as they picked up their equipment again and surrounded Karachi, who instantly started begging them to have mercy on him, but it was to no avail as the miners gave him the beating of his life. Meanwhile, Bakurio made his way to a house on top of a hill and calmly said, don't think you can ambush me, you can't escape my eyes. However, he received no response, so he let out a sigh and approached the door of the house to open it, but it directly exploded on him. Clearly, the enemy was experienced and they put explosive tags on the door that would trigger when someone opens it. But that wasn't the end of their ambush, as a man instantly behind Bakurio who was flung by the explosion. He wore a gray hooded mantle with 3 red stripes that appeared to be carrying something on his back. And under his mantle, Raiga wore a dark brown sleeveless vest falling to his knees where the inside was purple, a light brown belt, light gray pants, and like all the ninja swordsmen of the mist, he had bandages covering most of his body, his neck down to his chest, including his arms and his shin bones. He held the famous Kiba swords in his hands and they were covered in lightning that could allow him to cut through almost anything, and right now, he was aiming to stab at Bakuryo's throat and heart to finish him off directly. However, Bakuryo calmly twisted in the air and used a Chidori to coat his hand in lighting and easily deflected his attacks before he calmly said, and out come the rabbit from its hole. Reiga's face darkened slightly as he could tell that Bakuryo wasn't nervous at all, and more importantly, the explosion didn't cause him any damage, so he couldn't help but ask, "How did you find me? All dojutsu should be useless against me, and why are you unscathed from the explosion?" Bakuryo stared at his spotless clothes and shrugged before an exoskeleton covered his body to the shock of Reiga and said, "Let's just say I'm extra tough, and my Sharingan is quite special, which is why that little fella on your back wasn't capable of completely hiding your presence." Reiga's frown deepened as he thought, "Who is this monster? That ability, where did I see it before?" wondered Reiga, but before he could contemplate further, Bakuryo rushed at him and said, "Show me the skill of a ninja swordsman from the mist," and Reiga watched in shock as the lightning covering his hand transformed into a lightning blade. What kind of crazy chakra control is this? Wondered Reigan. However, Bakuryo didn't give him much time to think about it and started clashing with him. Reiga didn't comprehend what he was experiencing. Bakuryo's attacks weren't strong or fast for him to deal with, but his mastery of the sword was simply beyond him, and he could barely deal with the difference in skill as Bakuryo kept putting more and more pressure on him until they arrived to a point where Bakuryo increased the speed of his swing and aimed to slash at his stomach, making it appear like he was putting his all in it. "This is bad, I need to defend," thought Reiga, but a voice suddenly yelled from behind him, "No, Reiga. He's just fainting." Reiga was shocked as he watched Bakuryo's lightning sword flowing like water and his slash turned smoothly into a stab while avoiding his swords and headed right to his throat, stopping just mere millimeters away from it. "Not bad, kid, it seems like your dojutsu is better than I thought," muttered Bakuryo while staring at the load on Reiga's back and completely ignoring him. Then, a kid's voice suddenly echoed once more, the same voice that warned Reiga, and it was still hurried. "I can tell that you aren't here with evil intent and are probably interested in me. I will do anything you want, however, please spare Reiga." "I'm not that sort of creep," muttered Bakuryo with a shrug, but Reiga didn't like this situation and suddenly exploded in lightning from every pore of his body that rose all the way to the sky. Lightning Dragon Tornado. This is quite similar to Kirin, huh? Not bad, thought Bakuryo as he watched the dragon of lightning rushing at him with a menacing force. Seeing how Bakuryo was clearly underestimating him despite knowing of his identity as an ex-ninja swordsman of the mist was a huge blow to Reiga's ego and pride. So, he stopped caring anymore and directly used his ultimate attack, Lightning Dragon Tornado Jutsu. This jutsu takes advantage of his sword's kiba and their ability to conduct lightning. He starts by sending a huge current of lightning into the clouds, which turns them into thunderous clouds before he uses kiba as a lightning rod to attract the newly formed lighting from the sky and uses it to launch a terrifying attack on his enemies. The downside of this jutsu is that he carries Rinmara with him on his back at all times, so he can't use this freely since he risks electrocuting him to death. Rinmara, being a weak kid, currently suffered extreme pain and he couldn't even let out a scream. Thankfully, the thing Reiga was carrying him on had special isolating abilities that helped him avoid the full brunt of Reiga's outburst. Meanwhile, Bakuryo watched all of this calmly before he said, "Not bad, but not enough." Then, to the shock of Reiga, he simply waved his hand at the lightning in slow motion. Yet, that lightning dragon somehow started splitting in half wherever his hand passed and it eventually passed by his body without touching him. "Impossible!" yelled Reiga, but he found Bakuryo's fist greeting him before he could even dodge and it instantly blocked tens of his tenketsu and completely immobilized him. Staring at Reiga, who was splattered on the floor in pain, Bakuryo nodded silently while staring at his hand and thought, "It seems like using the gentle fist with the different elements manipulations I got is working wonders." This was a recent addition to his fighting style, since someone experienced enough with the gentle fist naturally understands how to negate ninjutsu-based attack, and coupled with that the ability to manipulate elements that aren't born from his chakra made Bakuryo a terrifying person to fight. This is why he was able to give so much trouble to the hidden village of the dead despite his clones having weaker bodies than the original, especially the early created ones that only had advanced body talent. Thankfully, that brat is still alive, thought Bakurio as he stared at the pained groans coming from the back of Raiga, and he slowly unfolded the cover to reveal a small kid with chin-length purple hair that was parted in the middle and had distinct red-colored eyes and appeared quite feminine in appearance. "It's good you are still alive," muttered Bakurio coldly before picking up Rinmara and dispelled any remaining traces of lightning coursing through his body and frowned slightly. "His situation is worse than I thought." Let him GG go, stuttered Raiga as he tried to stand up to his feet, but Bakurio didn't even bother staring at him and simply stomped him on the head and buried his face deep into the ground and said, "Little kid, I have a question for you." "Don't harm Raiga," was the first thing Rinmara said after having recovered some control over his body before he extended his neck to bite Bakurio. However, he almost broke his teeth without being able to do anything, so he started begging, "Please let Raiga go. Sigh. I don't care about this guy, but I can't let him run loose in this chaotic time and cause more trouble. I will take him to prison and it's up to Konoha to decide how to deal with him. That's as much kind I can be to this type of trash." I'm not trash," said Raiga through gritted teeth, and Bakurio simply tilted his head and raised his leg to stomp him again, but Ranmaru's red eyes suddenly started glowing with an eerie light and he said, "I can feel it. You are here to help me. If you harm Raiga anymore, I will kill myself." Bakurio's leg froze mid-air before he stomped the ground right beside Raiga's head, causing it to crack and sink in a diameter of more than 10 meters before he said coldly to Rinmara, "Check again with your ability if you think you are that worthy to threaten me." Ranmaru's eyes lit up again and he felt a chill as he saw nothing but death clutching him and Raiga by their throats, and there was no escaping it, and he started hyperventilating until Bakurio retracted his killing intent. "There won't be a next time. This is quite intriguing though. You can sense emotions. How rare." Bakurio frowned slightly when he saw this, and he couldn't help but wonder how could such a strong dojutsu be unknown to the world. Bakurio calmly stared at Rinmara, and seeing the kid nod at him fearfully, he started inquiring about the abilities of his eyes. And he was left shocked to say the least. This dojutsu grants its wielder the ability to hear and see things far beyond the normal human perceptive, allows them to see chakra, allows them to cast strong genjutsu that even if someone is aware of it, they still can't stop it. It allows the user to create some sort of red dust that hide their presence from even the perception of other strong dojutsu like the Sharingan and Byakugan. And finally, it grants its user the ability to see the life force that people has, and even manipulate their own to revitalize people from near-death states. If this isn't broken, what is? How could such a thing exist in this world? Muttered Bakurio, and he ended up finding himself lost in his own thoughts, as this was quite the mystery he found himself encountering, but he also started to understand why he found Ranmaru's body to be in such a unique state. He can't see the life force in his body, but he was pretty sure that it wasn't properly coursing through the lower half of his body. It was probably a miracle that he could come into the world. He probably almost died at birth, but he instead ended up using his dojutsu unconsciously and transferred the life force from his legs to his upper body to strengthen it and survive the ordeal, but it left his lower body in this weak state. After some contemplation, Bakurio concluded with a frown, "It's going to be hard to heal him and complete the quest, especially when considering the strict requirements of this mission, as I need to rise him back to full health. This means physically and mentally as well. What a pain. Let's go back for now. I will think about what to do with this guy later," said Bakurio before carrying Raiga like a potato sack and held the small Rinmara in his arms before he started making his way back to the miners that were beating Karachi, and he found the young man almost half dead with one foot in the grave. "That should be enough, everyone. Any more and he will die for real," spoke Bakurio calmly to the miners, taking them by surprise, and they stared at him in shock when they saw him carrying the unconscious Raiga. "You really defeated him. We are finally free." Disbelief covered the faces of the miners before it turned into pure joy, and they started celebrating, but one of them, an elderly man, suddenly approached Bakurio and said, "Sir, please help our village get rid of the ghosts and the dead hunting it. They are tormenting the people more than the Kurosuke family, yet we can't do anything about it." Bakurio paused slightly and stared at the man silently before he nodded and waved his hand, causing an army made of sand to appear in front of him. It was made of 10 sand riders, 20 sand assassins, 30 sand soldiers, and 40 sand archers, and they separated into 10 organized groups each led by a sand rider before Bakurio calmly said, "Head back with these soldiers, they will take care of the trouble in your village." The miners started thanking Bakurio again, to which he simply nodded and started making his way back to the Curry of Life shop with a shadow clone of his carrying the unconscious Karachi and healing him. Meanwhile, Ranmaru's eyes suddenly widened as he finally realized why Raiga found Bakurio familiar. That weird armor, and now the sand soldiers. He's part of the infamous dead hunters. Why does he want to help me? Wondered Ranmara as he kept staring at Bakurio secretly throughout their journey to figure him out, but it was to no avail. After returning to the Curry of Life shop, Bakurio asked old lady Sancho to gather her stuff before he went ahead and summoned a snake from Raichi cave and made it carry them back to Konoha. He still had many shops working despite the chaos of the world, and he planned to add Sancho and her great curry to his chain restaurants that were being managed by Makoto. During that journey, he informed Fugaku and Yagura about Reiga's situation so that they can deal with him later while he occupied himself with studying Ranmaru's condition. This kid can't live past 25 with his lack of life force. Should I use the one's own life reincarnation jutsu? Contemplated Bakurio silently as he stared at Ranmara silently. At the peak of medical arts, an expert in medical ninjutsu can even learn how to roughly manipulate their life force and inject it into someone else to help them recover from fatal injuries. However, the user will lose their life if they use too much of their life force, which is why this S-rank jutsu is also considered a forbidden jutsu. But even without considering its risks, which stops many people from using it, very few people can manage to learn it in the first place, and Bakurio eventually was able to learn it from the cage-level puppeteer and healing ninja of Suna, Chio. Sasori's grandma. Well, technically, I only need to use life force, it doesn't have to be mine. Bakurio's eyes ignited eerily before he retrieved a special tube and approached Ranmara, who was sitting beside the tied-up Raiga. Time for an experiment. What do you want? Asked Ranmara without using his eyes' power to detect Bakurio's emotions, as he already instructed him not to use them on him again, but he was truly tempted to do so when he saw the weird look in his eyes. However, Bakurio simply shrugged and said, "Go to sleep, it won't take long," before tapping him lightly on the head and putting him to sleep. "What are you doing to Ranmara?" asked Raiga coldly, and Bakurio calmly took out a syringe and took a small bit of the white content of the tube, which was actually Hashirama's cells, before he said lightly, "I'm going to heal him." Raiga's face froze slightly as if he couldn't believe what he just heard, and he couldn't help but ask, "Why are you doing this? You should know that we are criminals, right?" Bakurio's movements were fluid, showing that he was an experienced doctor, as he started injecting both of Ranmaru's legs with Hashirama's cells and started controlling their enormous vitality to nourish his legs. Surprisingly, he noticed that his eyes appeared to have activated automatically and were helping him absorb that life force. What an incredible dojutsu, or should I say bloodline, thought Bakurio with narrowed eyes before calmly replying to Raiga, "You did plenty of evil, that's true, but this kid is pure. All he did was help the person that brought him out of his darkness, even if that help harmed other people. Innocence doesn't differentiate between good and evil." Raiga didn't know how to respond, and he couldn't help but stare at Ranmara with a guilty look on his face, especially when considering how he didn't want to leave his side no matter what. "What do you plan to do with him?" asked Raiga, and Bakurio replied as he finished healing Ranmara, "I will make him join one of the ninja academies to train him properly. He can turn into a great asset for the future, and hopefully, redeem his sins." After this, Bakurio simply left while Raiga remained silent for a long time until Ranmara opened his eyes and stood up absent-mindedly to the shock of Raiga. "What happened? How long did I fall asleep for?" However, Raiga instantly started crying and shaking in excitement despite his bindings, and he exclaimed happily, "Ranmara, you are standing on your feet." Ranmaru's face was full of shock, and he couldn't help but stare at his legs for a long time before he started jumping and playing around on top of the moving snake. Meanwhile, after Bakurio healed Ranmara, he sat on top of the head of the giant snake and slowly read the notifications he received. Medical Art Advancement Quest completed. Congratulations, your Medical Arts Mastery Level 100 has advanced into Miracle Doctor Mastery Level 1. Bakurio felt a weird sensation coursing through his own body, and he suddenly started feeling it. his life force, the life force of every single cell of his body, and the life force of every single thing around him. He instinctively entered a state of being one with nature, and his enlightened mastery kicked in as well as he suddenly started seeing things he never saw before. Manipulating the life force was one thing, but seeing and feeling it was a completely different sensation. He could see inside himself, the structure of his bones, muscles, tendons, and even his various bloodline and how they coexisted together. Bakurio was slightly surprised when he noticed how the channels and vessels that carried the blood all across his body appeared to have a stream of multicolored energy coursing through them. It was made of 4 colors in total, one was pure white, another was crimson, one was dark, and the last one was blue. However, as his heart kept pumping these energies throughout his body, Bakurio noticed that they didn't merge with each other no matter what, as if some sort of invisible energy was stopping that from happening. Are these the different bloodlines I have? Hyuga, Uchiha, Akamichi, and Shadow, but why are they not merging with each other? Is this normal? I need to see if this is the same with other people. The moment Bakurio's thoughts reached this point, all of the other true clones that were in the various hidden villages and highly populated areas started examining the life force of anyone he could find, and he concluded one thing: he was the only one with a multicolored bloodline stream. So, he quickly reached the most logical conclusion: it seems like being able to use both the Sharingan and Byakugan alternatively wasn't a mere coincidence, and the same goes for why I couldn't integrate any new bloodlines no matter how much I tried, including Hashirama's. It seems like that invisible energy is what's causing all of this, and it's probably a product of the system. With this thought in mind, Bakurio casually opened the description of his Miracle Doctor Mastery as he wanted to confirm something. Miracle Doctor Level 1. You gained the ability to see, manipulate, and absorb life force, allowing you to heal illnesses and injuries beyond what normal medicine could, and the higher the level, the higher the effect of this ability is going to be. Incredible. With this in my body control skill, I can risk attempting to try manipulating those bloodlines and merge them together. With a determined look on his face, one of Bakurio's true clones that was on the base of the dead hunters suddenly stopped what he was doing and left to a secluded room before he sat cross-legged and entered a similarly enlightened state before he muttered, "Let's start the first experiment." Then, he started by first trying to see if he could manipulate the barrier stopping the bloodlines from merging together, and to his surprise, he found that it was quite easy to remove it as it was made of his life force as well. So without further hesitation, he instantly removed it completely to allow those energies to merge. However, in but an instant, all hell broke loose as both of the eyes of that true clone exploded while his body started disfiguring, with his muscles turning into fat while other parts turned into a shadow and evaporated into thin air, and before he could let out even a scream or try to stop what happening, he was only able to catch a glimpse of all those energies rushing into his heart before everything exploded and he died on the spot, a very gruesome death. Right as the true clone died, a rush of emotions and memories were transferred to Bakurio and all of his true clones, making them feel a chill, and a shiver coursed through them in unison. They just experienced a glimpse of the pain and the horrible death that the true clone went through, and if not for his strong heart, a normal person could have easily lost their mind from this kind of experience. However, Bakurio simply collected himself and another one of his true clones moved into that secluded chamber. This clone was special as it had the Rinnegan he got from Nagato, and it simply shot the bloody room a quick glance before he manipulated the leftover bits of blood and flesh and summoned the head of the King of Hell, which he fed that pile of gore to. Then, after some munching, the King of Hell spat out a fully healed true clone that calmly nodded at the Rinnegan-wielding clone before he sat back cross-legged again and started contemplating. It seems like I underestimated the effect of bloodline on the body. The flow of that energy can't be messed with lightly as it will have a direct effect on the body. However, it seemed like not all 4 of the bloodlines want to coexist with each other. This is quite problematic, but it only means I will need better control over my life force. Then, that true clone made it his sole purpose to focus on mastering how to control his life force to the point where he can control and merge those bloodlines safely without risking another gruesome death. After Bakurio got over this incident, he left his Dr. True clone with Rinmara to study his dojutsu and bloodline a bit more, while another one led Sancho to visit Makoto. Bakurio-kun, it has been a while since you last visited, spoke Makoto with a wide smile on her face before she gave Bakurio a warm hug. He tried to dodge, but he understood that the complaining he will have to deal with if he does so is much more annoying than her warm hug. Yes, I've been busy lately, spoke Bakurio, and as he said this, Makoto suddenly noticed the small Sancho that was hidden behind his body, and she couldn't help but ask curiously, "Who's this old lady?" "Ah, please don't mind me, you should enjoy your reunion with your son," spoke Sancho with an honest smile, and her words instantly made Makoto's eyes light up as she quickly covered Bakurio's mouth since he was clearly about to deny it before she happily said, "That's right, he's my cute little son." What about him is cute? Did she even see how he cruelly killed so many of the Kurosuke family? Wondered Karachi, but he didn't dare say anything as he watched Sancho and Makoto hitting it off, and Bakurio quickly explained the situation to her, prompting her to promise to take care of the old lady and help her settle in Konoha. Now that's settled, time to approach another tailed beast, thought Bakurio before he bid the reluctant Makoto goodbye and started making his way back to the border of the land of demons, his target being Killer B, the Jinchuriki of Gyuki. Ellipsis. Meanwhile, in his dark cocoon, Bakurio was analyzing everything the true clones were discovering and experiencing, but what occupied his thoughts more than anything else was the situation with the true clone that got absorbed by the darkness. There's still no clue on where he was transported to, and I can't locate him no matter the method or how much I focus on my connection with him. All I can be sure of is that he's still alive somewhere, thought Bakurio with a frown on his face, but just as he was contemplating this matter, a wave of memories suddenly rushed into his brain, and he was left shocked, to say the least. Is this even real? Flashback. Inside an eerie and dark throne room. A voice suddenly echoed. "We finally meet," spoke the figure on the throne, and Bakurio's surprised eyes instantly turned empty and cold as he replied, "Indeed." Bakurio stared right at the darkness sitting on the throne, yet no matter how much he tried to analyze it, he simply couldn't penetrate through its veil. "Finally, I got to meet this monster," thought Bakurio with his heart feeling both fear and excitement. "It's unfortunate that this is but a clone of yours and we can't meet in person, although it's a better fit to consider it as one of your copies," spoke a heavy voice from the direction of the throne, and Bakurio calmly narrowed his eyes and noticed the chains tying the throne in place before he said, "The pleasure is mine. How come someone like you, who's been hiding his existence all this time, decided to grant me this audience? Straight to the point, huh? I like your untrusting heart. It's really fit to be swallowed by darkness, ha ha ha." Bakurio's eyes narrowed slightly and he remained silent until that guy stopped his laughter and said, "First of all, I'm sure you are curious about who I am, right? Aren't you, Jashin?" asked Bakurio directly, and he could see a toothy grin appear from the veil of darkness that sent a shiver down his spine as the dark being said, "Jashin, chaos, evil incarnate, monster. I've been called many things, most of them I can't even recall anymore." Who are these people that called him all of these names? Are they related to his chain somehow? Wondered Bakurio as he suddenly felt like he might have guessed wrong about the true nature of this darkness, and he couldn't help but ask, "Who are you? Or what are you?" "Me." Another grin appeared on the throne before a terrible aura emerged from it and hit Bakurio on the face, sending him flying and smashing into the wall as the sickening voice echoed, "I'm but an unholy copy of life." Bakurio did his best to protect himself from the weird corrupt aura before he asked, "What does that mean?" The aura suddenly dissipated as if it wasn't real and was replaced by the original pure evil and malice that made people feel like they were being watched from where they couldn't see. "I was born in uncertainty, which earned me the title Chaos, but the fear and ignorance of the people that feared my existence made them decide to destroy me rather than give me a chance to be good, and because of that, I have no goodness left, it was stolen from me." The calm voice suddenly turned into rage as it started shouting at Bakurio, giving him chills, and he instantly realized that whatever the thing he was dealing with might be, it was definitely not stable, and he heard it continue saying, "My darkness wasn't born, it was forged by this damned prison, and as dark as it could be, my heart will always be darker." Then the darkness suddenly fell silent before its rampant aura started to calm down, and it spoke with an alluring tone, "Become my servant, I shall grant you eternal life and unimaginable powers." Bakurio frowned slightly at the offer and thought, so that's why he decided to meet me, huh? Does he feel threatened? Before he suddenly smirked and said, "Why would I join the ranks of a loser?" The air suddenly turned still before that entity started laughing. "Young man, words can't provoke me, plus, I will soon get my revenge on that bastard and make him suffer forever for sealing me here." What's this supposed to mean? Is he close to freeing himself? Wondered Bakurio before he spoke. I will have to consider further with my main body. Take your time. However, keep in mind that once I leave this place, the offer won't be there anymore for you to take. Then, that true clone suddenly found himself back where he was before, the same island he was training his dark chakra at. End of flashback. Thank you for listening guys, see you in the next part.